first question is, I want to know what you, as Mr. Chima, your particular concept of governance. And then I would also want to know, given the Nigerian situation as it is today, what are your preferred solutions to the leadership failure, to the failure of governance in Nigeria today? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My concept of governance is very simple. It is that man cannot govern another man until he knows another government. Because every regulator must be regulated. Every judge must have a judge he submits to. Every king must have a king he submits to. And every lawgiver must have a lawgiver he submits to. And if you acquire executive powers and there is no power that regulates you and man becomes the highest decision-making organ in any particular transaction, that transaction is bound to head southward. And so when you give power, for instance, to someone like David, who has another king, who is God, David operated absolute monarchy. But there were just a few times he made mistakes. Built a civilization in just 40 years. Made his mistakes as a human being. But then he was not terrible. The citizens were enjoying it. Him himself were enjoying it. It was a civilization. That till today, Israelis are hoping to reenact the kind of government and the kind of society David gave them. Then you also had Moses. This man does not just have governmental powers. He can point at the Red Sea and it divides. But then not just that, he was running their feeding program, he was running their health insurance, he was running the Minister of Economy, he was running the transportation system, he was running a battle strategy, he was running all the ministries, departments and agencies of that government. And yet, he did not take off like a tornado. Just one mistake again that he made. Same with David, just one mistake. My concept is that men, no matter how intelligent, cannot write the laws of a society except they submit to another lawgiver. Man, no matter how audacious, how daring, cannot govern effectively except he has an internal government. A government that regulates him. Now, having a government does not mean that you will not make a mistake. But it means that when you make a mistake, you have a regulator that can tell you, okay, you made a mistake, don't do that again. But then when you become the highest authority, especially in the kind of governance systems you have now, where the institutions of checks and balances are nowhere, if you have people who cannot be regulated internally, they are already wrecks waiting to happen. In America, it is better. Because if you become a terrible president, there are court systems, there are media systems, there are civil society systems that want to keep you under check. But in Nigeria, for instance, the governor, the State House of Assembly is in his pocket. The state media is in his pocket. Civil society is in his pocket. Traditional rulers in his pocket. So how then is he not going to be a mad person? That's why your governors are acting the way they do, because there is no check and balance, even though the constitution designed that, but it's not functioning. And so when you are now going to be executing such powers, you must make sure that you submit to another power that when you finish taking an executive decision, something will prick your conscience and say you did well. Something will also prick your conscience and tell you did not do well. If you don't have that thing that pricks conscience, my view is that you cannot be a good person in government, no matter how brilliant you are. Because rulership is from the heart. So there's a book I'm writing, it's called The Heart of a Public Servant. If God gives us the grace, we'll publish it next year. Any public servant that his heart becomes corrupted, no matter how brilliant you are, and you've said that we are brilliant, that's what I think that you have to have. But then in attempting to solve the problem, there are two things I want to see done. And that is also what I'm doing. One, you must raise leaders who are conscious of leadership. So there was an article I wrote, I think published 2 or 3 days ago about Mbanoju. I was bemoaning what I called the burdens of leadership. And I said in that article, if God gives you the opportunity to become the executive governor of Anambra State, what he has done is that he has entrusted the lives of 6.2 million people into your own hands. Now, as the chief executive, you and your governing elite can determine the number of pregnant women that will die in childbirth just because there are no medical disposables. You, as the governor, can decide how many people that will die of preventable because you did bad rules and you did not provide emergency care services. You can decide the number of citizens that unknown government will kidnap and kill because you took the security vote and took it to somewhere else. That governor can decide the quality of education that is given to these young people in the classrooms. That same governor can determine the amount of businesses that will crumble under the heavy weight of taxation, or that will crumble under terrible governance decisions. You see, every sphere, God has just given you 6.2 million people. And usually the way God works is that he delays his judgment. Because you would want, if a governor steals 1 naira today, he dies tomorrow. But that's not how God works. He delays his judgment. Even with us. Because it is not when you immediately lie, there will be a hand from heaven that will slap you. Usually something will tell you in your conscience you lie though. But then when it comes to government, we want God to carry catapult and knife and start killing every government. Everybody that makes a bad decision, God will kill him. I mean, okay, if we said that Abacha died in office, the people who replaced him, then what happens? That's why the people who are praying for Tinubu to die, I've asked them, please stop wasting your prayers. Direct it somewhere else. Even if he dies, there is no guarantee. Then what does God need to do? To start killing every leader? It's not sustainable. So what you want to do is to have leaders who first understand with this consciousness that leadership is a burden. And if your heart is not trained, if you don't understand this, you might go there. And then for some reason, some spirit will come to tell you that stealing money is better than putting things in the hospital. I don't know. There's some foul. Maybe it's not a spirit, but you can't have that kind of thing around you. And that's not the topic for today. Another day, maybe we'll discuss the heart of a public servant. You will see how the heart of a public servant can become corrupted in 2 ways quickly. One, by minimizing the impact of your actions. So the person who is, for instance, the head of Primary Healthcare Development Agency in Abuja can write a memo, and with one memo can steal billions or millions. And then that memo he has written or she has written, she does not have the understanding that because of this memo, 700 women will die while giving birth. It will not occur to her. Because actually what she did was just a fast business. Nobody will find out. You just write off 800 million. Share some money around and then take the rest. Perhaps fly abroad, buy cars, buy properties. But then this person has gotten to the stage where he or she does not see the implication of their actions. That's desensitization. And whenever you are in a position of responsibility, and for some reason something happens to your conscience or to your heart that you have refused to see the full scope of your actions, then that person, no matter how brilliant, has become an accident. Because you will not see why what you do or the full impact of what you do. If we move it away from governance, let's bring it to our everyday lives. If people think that, for instance, there are people who think that if someone sent you on an errand to buy something and that you can keep the change, by the way, it's people who believe that they can cut corners. They don't usually see, for instance, Yahoo boys, when you talk to them, why are you doing this? They'll tell you, Americans came to Africa and they imprisoned our people. They did this, they did that, they did the other one. That what we're trying to do is to try to repatriate our money. We're trying to fight for our ancestors who they made slave trade. And you see, for them to continue in their business, you have to give them a rational explanation that will water down their conscience. And so because they now believe that stealing is no longer stealing, that defrauding people is no longer defrauding, that defrauding now means repatriation, then they can function better with that. And that is how your civil servants are. That when you give them contracts for roads, that they tend to see money and what they can do with the money, but they don't see that people will use these roads, that businesses who can't access speedy delivery of services will go out of business. They don't see that people can die on this road. They don't see that the several man hours, you have a whole country. Every morning, people are locked up in traffic for 2 hours. You are taking away 2 hours of life for 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 people every day. Multiply that and you see the man hours you have reduced from them. From the few limited hours. So you don't see the full scope of the impact of your decisions. then that person has become reckless in my view. That's number one. Then the second is that you become so close. You become so close to issues that your heart has become dead to the issues. And this is what usually happens to frontliners. Now, for you to see that the woman in Abuja is still a good person, if she ever hears that there is a woman that is about to die while giving birth, from that 800 million she stole, she can give you 1 million to go and fix your issue. That's why you have a lot of politicians who are philanthropists, because they don't see the full scope of the work they are rods. But anytime you bring them into sharp contrast, anytime you can get them to see the scope of things, there are actually thieves who are very soft-hearted. They are criminals, but they can't stand a crying person. So they can steal, but then once they steal, they can now take that money they stole and then go to give another person. So that same woman that is in office in Abuja that steals money, if you take her to see the women who that her pen has written away their lives from, she can bring back that money and give to those women, because she is suffering from one level of desensitization. Then the second level of desensitization is people who are frontliners. Now, this person is a medical doctor, okay? And before you become a medical doctor, there is a kind of heart you need to sustain. You will not be like me that can't stand blood. You must be able to stand blood. Because if I see someone who has an accident, my whole brain will shut down. And like every other person here, except you're a medical healthcare worker. If you see someone who has a terrible accident, is bleeding, is almost about to die, your brain will shut down immediately. But then for a medical doctor, because of training and disposition of heart, your brain cannot shut down then. You must be able to still think logically for you to be able to treat this person. So you know what procedure to apply, you know what drug to apply, you know in what dose, you can in one split second diagnose the issue, recommend what should be done, and actually get on doing it. But the terrible thing with that is that if you don't take time, you will become impervious to pain. And that's where you will go to hospital and you'll be crying, "Doctor, my wife is dying," and they're eating. Because they've seen so much pain that pain is no longer pain to them. And you also see this with policemen. There's a certain kind of training you need to have before you can take the life of another. But if you don't take your time, you will cross that fine line that killing now becomes. You can't find the difference between an ant and a chicken and a human being. And within that framework, you have policemen who have gone through training. They can take life in split second. And it's a split second decision. So they can take immediate and split second decisions. That's their training. But then, if you don't take time, you will kill so much so that now human beings become ants to you. And that's why you talk about police brutality. They don't understand it. They kill for fun. They kill for a living. Because of their level of immersion into what they are doing, they no longer can feel the impact of what they do. I don't know how to explain this, but I just pray that God gives you understanding. So there are people who are so far removed from the impact of their actions that they don't know how their actions impact the society. And then there are some people who are so immersed in their actions that that impact has become impactless to them. So the policeman can kill anybody at any time without any remorse. You are begging, please. Policemen have killed because of 20 naira. They have killed because of 15 naira. They have killed because of 15 naira. In one of the stories, this particular woman, they arrested I think, I don't know if it was the only child or something, or the only male child. And what was that? One funny thing, the SARS arrested the guy. And this woman, every time she would cook and bring food for the son, unknowing to her, policemen have killed the son. You know how SARS people killed. You know all the stories. But every day, this woman will bring food, and the same police people who killed the son will collect the food and eat, and tell her that we'll give this food to your son. So not only have you killed this woman's child, but you had the boldness to stand before her and to be collecting money from her and collecting food from her, and you are eating. This is what desensitization does to a man or a woman. And so you now have a lot of people in positions of responsibility who don't know how their actions impact the society. So my goal is to get people to see the full implication of what they do, to get our lawmakers to see that lawmaking, the full scope of the office they occupy, and on whose behalf they are executing those powers. The full scope, because once someone is a civil servant, there is a power that has been given to you. It is actually God's powers. When we got into this, you will see that it was God who designed civil service, and that the powers he gave to civil servants is a godly kind of power. That civil servants can determine which businesses will go thrive and which businesses will go down. In some instances, though, not all. And so my goal is to train the next level of leaders. That's number one. So leadership training is a way you can get back Nigeria. Not necessarily academic training. Yes, you will have to train their intellect. It's an all-round training in fitness, physical fitness, in intellectual fitness, in whether you call it religious, emotional, spiritual, whatever. But then you are fit all round for responsibility. That's number one. And then number two is to train the citizens. What is the role of the citizen in this? And I have begun that in several ways. If you are operating any governance system, you ask yourself, what is my role in the governance system? If what you are practicing is democracy, then know it for sure that democracy cannot work until you work it, because democracy operates a demand and supply. If people don't demand credible governance is not supplied. And so now that we are working a democracy, Nigerians don't demand for good governance, so make no mistake about it. Nigerians can complain, Nigerians can nag, Nigerians can murmur, but Nigerians don't demand. For instance, you will see a government trying to do something, and then you will now see someone coming to comment under that post. Maybe government post, the government signs MOU with Dubai, with UAE. These are the details of the MOU. And you come to see somebody under that post, foolish man, thief, oloribruku, nonsense, barawo. Now, in that's the only thing he knows, to curse people in government. Now, cursing people in government, how have you actually demanded for credible governance? No. So you ask yourself, Nigerians murmur and complain about the elections. Now, I'm not discountenancing their emotions and the murmurings and the complaining. But that thing you are discussing in the beer parlor, how can it get to the National Assembly? That's the problem. Because, for instance, today, there was a public hearing on electoral reform. All those brilliant ideas you were sharing with your friends in the bar, people don't have the skills and the knowledge of how to take it to make it a concrete governance demand. So, for instance, I know go agree and no go agree is some component of demanding, but that's not the only thing you need to do for you to demand credible governance. Sometimes you may have to engage. Sometimes you may have to put your ideas on paper. So there are a lot of things Nigerians can do at every level of education. There are people whose work may be to protest the streets. There are people whose work may be to call Ole Barawo, thief, Onyori, one of those things. But then there are others whose work will be to write concrete governance policies. Then there are others whose work is to support those. So, but then if you ever find yourself in democracy and someone tells you that the only thing you need to do is to vote once in 4 years and everything will become all right, that person has lied to you. It does not work in America. It does not work anywhere you see democracy. There is usually a functional demand side. And usually the demand side of democracy or the demand side of governance is usually far ahead of the supply side. For instance, if you demand 20 things, they can give you 15. But then if you demand for only 2, you will get 0.5. And so in Nigeria, we don't demand enough. And that's why we think that politicians will be willing to supply. How do you think that your politicians, even with the best of intentions, will be ahead of you in supplying governance? You know, Nigerians want their government to be doing. No, the government only responds to demand. If they sense that roads are what people need now, they will start building roads. If they sense that insecurity is the whole thing, they will focus their attention there. So usually government focuses their attention where people focus attention to. If people don't have the skills to focus attention and to drive the government to focus their attention where they want the government to focus their attention, they can complain in their houses. They can murmur in their houses. They can murmur in the public transport. When they are flying, they are murmuring, they are complaining. But that complaint has not become a concrete public policy proposal, or it has not become a concrete action to get. Of course, Tinubu knows that nobody likes him. But then, how does that knowledge help him to shape public policy? Then you must have to organize and impact government. And anybody who has seen my latest intervention knows that I've been working hard to convince the opposition political platforms. Today, there was a public hearing on Electoral Act amendment. There was no proposal from Labour Party. There was no proposal from Peter Obi. There was no proposal from Peter Obi's Presidential Campaign Council. And the people who are leading Electoral Act amendment are the same people who stole elections. How do you think that they can write good laws? So it is not enough for you to go to TV and complain. You have to organize. There is a process to lawmaking. So if you want to get laws to be made, you must have to organize that. And then, you know that Nigerians don't have focus. I'm not saying this in a derogatory manner. What I mean is that Nigerians are in eternal pursuit of trends. Today, BB Niger is trending. Everybody becomes a BB Niger expert. Tomorrow, insecurity will trend. Everybody will become a security expert. The next day, another issue will trend. So you have that people are jumping from one trending issue to the other trend, and then you are not staying. That's why every given point in my life, I usually stay between 3 or 5 public policy issues. I don't move away from that. Because I have found out that you need to stay on one issue to solve it. You can't, if they are discussing census, you talk census today. Tomorrow, you are a health expert discussing medical doctors. The next day, you are they write that Fulani herdsmen have killed people. You are now an expert in Fulani herdsmen. The other day, so that's what Nigerians do. So they jump from one topical issue to the other. So before you get the government to pay attention on one issue, you have jumped to another issue. Am I saying that all of us would now start focusing on one issue? No. But there are people who may have to focus on health and stay there until the health issue is solved. Others focus on their thematic areas, whatever interests them. But then what you have is that Nigerians jump from one issue to the other without getting closure on any. So in a given week, there will be about 4 or 5 trending issues. And your normal public influencer is discussing the 5 topical issues. Next week, there will be another 4 to 5 topical issues. Go and watch all your Nigerian influencers. And then usually because people follow after these influencers. And so every given story that trends, they must offer opinion on it. And that is not the usual way to get government attention. You must stay on an issue for you to get government attention to that. So 2 things I've said to you. My approach to governance is built on the foundation that governance is an enormous responsibility, that if you don't train people to be competent enough to discharge that responsibility, then they will not be able to discharge it with aplomb. Number 2, that the citizens have a role to play in democratic governance, and that you must help the citizens and guide the citizens to play that role. Today, both the demand side of governance in Nigeria is not working, and then the supply side of governance is also not working. So you must get people to be efficient supply side experts, whether it is legislative governance, judicial governance, executive governance, that these are experts in supply side of government. That if they become governors, they become good governors. If they become legislators, they are expert legislators. How can we train those people? Number 1. Number 2, how can we also train demand side guys? That look, this your murmuring is not enough. How can we collect this your murmuring and make it into a concrete public policy something? It can be a movement, it can be something, but whatever. But how can we get you from, you are murmuring about this issue because you care so much about it. Now that you care so much about it, don't stop at murmuring. Do this one bit and it could guarantee you a slightly better outcome.